Okay, this is going to be a series of videos, so the one you're watching is only one of a series, and I do encourage you to watch the rest of them. Also, I encourage you to watch the full-length webumentary titled Global Warming, Myth or Reality, A Skeptic's View. It goes through the entire science behind global warming, but with this series, we're going to pick and choose some interesting pieces, and we're going to ask the viewer, does global warming pass the stink test? We're going to take a look at the science, and I want you to ask yourself, does that even make sense? Most importantly, ask yourself, if a big oil company produced a report like that, wouldn't the environmentalists be going ape nuts? Because what we're going to do is we're going to take a hard look at the science, and then once again, just ask yourself, does this pass the stink test? Okay, we've already made a video on this one, but I felt it was worth re-examining because I truly think this shows the greatest danger of what happens when we follow these environmentalists without holding their feet to the fire as far as the science goes. Back in the 60s, Rachel Carlson had DDT banned. Now, if you go and you do the research on it, you see that there was a lot of junk science that led to the banning of DDT. If you take a look at the research, you'll see that the research wasn't easily replicated, meaning that when they redid these studies, they found that DDT didn't thin birds' eggs. DDT does not cause cancer. In fact, a professor used to demonstrate this by eating a teaspoon of DDT in front of his class. But there was a huge outrage about DDT. Well, the problem with that is we banned DDT. Now, DDT was being used for very useful reasons to help man. It basically kept down malaria. So while some evidence did point to the fact that it might thin eggs, which is a cost to both the environment and man, there's also a benefit that it precluded, and that was stamping out of malaria. The other thing that was interesting about the findings that Rachel Carlson used was that she focused on the fact that the study showed that DDT thinned eggs. Well, okay, thinned eggs. Okay, I will give them that. Who cares if they thin eggs? The issue is whether or not it hurt the bird. Well, lo and behold, when they did the study wasn't about thinning eggs. What's the important thing? The study is the survival rate of the birds. Well, lo and behold, pheasant eggs, it was found, that did actually have the quote-unquote thinned eggs, the ones that they did find, had a higher survival rate. So if you look at the science, you can make the argument that DDT actually helped the survival of the birds and didn't harm it. And yet Rachel Carlson was able to seize onto that data that it did thin eggs, ignoring the fact of what the real issue is whether or not it harmed the bird or not. And she was able to get DDT banned. Now, what did that result in? Well, you banned DDT, all right, which, by the way, has just recently been lifted by the WHO, the World Health Organization, and they're actually recommending the use of DDT indoors over in Africa because of the spread of malaria. This headline just made it in the news this week, and this is what I wanted to drive home. Because we banned DDT, we allowed malaria to spread unchecked throughout sub-Saharan Africa. Well, lo and behold, the studies now show that malaria is spreading HIV. So we can point the finger of the spread of HIV directly at the environmental policies of Rachel Carlson, because if you remember, HIV was discovered in the early 80s, late 70s, after the banning of banning of DDT. So you could argue that had we been using DDT in sub-Saharan Africa, we could have prevented the HIV crisis before it ever got started, because those malaria-spreading mosquitoes would have been killed. So this is a great example on how what sounds like a great idea can turn into an absolute disaster. The other example you can use is the fire prevention program spread by the environmentalists, how they fight tooth and nail to prevent any kind of a tree to be removed from our national forests. Well, the problem is what that has resulted in is an overly dense forest. Okay, and what the problem with an overly dense forest is, it's easy for fire to go from one tree to another if it's overly dense, plus all that scrap that falls down to the floor has basically created our national forest into tinder boxes. And that's why today you don't have these little well-contained forest fires like you used to. Whereas Mother Nature, I mean, she invented lightning to burn down a forest. She doesn't like old-growth forest. That's why she invented lightning. She goes and burns them down every once in a while. Well, the problem today is when you get a forest fire, it's a catastrophic forest fire. You don't burn little acreage, you burn millions and millions of acres, and it spreads like mad. So once again, you can point to the destruction of our national forests right at the environmentalists, and now with this finding, you can start to point the finger that the AIDS epidemic itself can be tied to the actions of the environmentalists. And once again, we don't want to repeat these mistakes. These are tremendously costly mistakes. Since the banning of DDT, we've lost over 1 million lives a year to malaria. And that's, once again, directly attributed to Rachel Carlson. I have that picture there. I have Rachel Carlson along with Hitler, Stalin, Pol Pot, and Mao Zedong. And you can see the devastation that it's causing these people that die of AIDS, that die of malaria. And once again, if you follow these environmentalists, you got to be very careful, because the consequences that they've imposed on society and people in the past have been catastrophic.